Hello everyone, my name is Caliburn and welcome back to Minecraft Glamour, where I will teach you everything that I know about building. This is episode 2, Modular Building. Modular building is a building style involving grids and cells. It helps break down your builds into digestible pieces that are simple to design and easy to replicate. Going back to the build that we had before, you can see that we have a grid pattern that we also went over in the prior video. You can see that each of these pieces kind of line themselves up on this 5x5 grid. Over here, which you may have seen in the thumbnail, I have a few references of a few frames. For example, we have this frame here, which is made with an indentation in the back, made out of stripped pale oak logs, as you may be able to tell if you watch the last video, which goes over your ability to look at each block for what it is. We have spruce slab, we have spruce stair as well, we have the spruce fence, and that is most of what comprises of this cell here. Now, if you go onto this cell, you have this structural shape here, which doesn't add a whole lot of detail, not a whole lot of information, and it makes it easy to look over, which brings you to something more like this, which is a little taller to show you that it doesn't have to be 5x5, it can be 5x6, or whatever you fancy in particular to make a structure or a cell with these build styles. Now here we have the azalea bushes. Since this is on the ground and it's on grass, we can have these, and this adds a good texture and a good shape to the build, along with adding a splash of color. Now you'll also notice that there are slabs here, here, and here, as well as trapdoors to kind of bind them into a sort of slight curve to have a little overhang to the window. And what this does is it adds a little bit of depth to the build and gives it a little bit more of an interesting feeling when you are looking at the window. And of course, it then gives it this very connected feel. Over here with this wider design, once again to show you that you can use any real size for these so long as you can break it up into these digestible pieces. You'll find this curve that I made in the last video, and you will also find that we have yet another one of these curves for an overhang, once again adding shape. I even decided to go with something a little unique, something that I normally don't do, with this small drip leaf in water here, to give it a very interesting shape and this little touch of color. Moving on to this one, you can see that we have an even larger window here. These larger windows are harder to work with when it comes to detail. And you can also add these glowberry vines here, which you can even turn into light sources as long as you have a bit of bone meal, which can really spruce up the appearance, the color, and it even gives it more light, which draws your eyes further to this. It's got a lot of shape, a lot of color, a lot of depth, and it just generally will be a very good cell to have. We do have these grids over here, and we can even work with this here. And I'll go ahead and recreate this piece right here, which is part of a foundation. What you'll first see if you're using your builder's eye is that there are these little stone pillars on the side here, stone brick pillars, which kind of make up the shape of this here. You'll also notice that we have cobblestone and andesite for a sort of texture. So you'll have that for a little texture to add, which kind of, you'll notice, has a gradient to it as well that makes a very, very detailed yet simple, very flat wall. The issue with having a very flat wall is that it's not got a lot of depth. While this is good in its own right, you'll want to have something else, which is where these little pillars come in. You'll notice I have these stairs here. This is a barrel, which can double as a very convenient and quick dump chest. And these spruce fences to give it kind of this pillar look. Next we have these azaleas, which once again, since they're placed on grass, they give a nice splash of color, a good texture, and a nice bit of depth to the build. Up here, which will create an overhang, has spruce trapdoors and spruce slabs. And this, once again, starts an overhang. And you can see how then that leads to our next cell, which technically would be an outer extrusion of this piece here, a nice overhang, this spruce outline here. You have this, which lines up perfectly with the foundation. And then from here you have the window, which is just to add a bit of shape and of course an area you can look out of. After this you'll have the azalea leaves, which of course I like because they add a bit of color and they add more texture to the shape. Now you'll notice I'm not exactly fully replicating the shape and the texture of this one. As you can see, I changed it up a bit, and that's something that's important to do as it just allows your build to have a little bit of differentiation between them. And once again, there's a flower pot, which I'm going to have to find. Alright. With a nice cherry sapling. And cherry saplings really are one of my favorites because they're such an interesting shape. They have so much color, so much contrast. Really helps the build. Now going over here, we're just going to do a few of these in a similar style, free of any replication, just as a bit of practice. So for example, we'll just have this basic shape here, and you'll notice that we have a bit of a wall. Now there's a lot of things that you could do here. For example, with this, you could just have it be some structural shape to make it look like it's just a piece of reinforced wall that doesn't exactly have much of a purpose in the actual build beyond just making it look a little stronger. Now you can do it like this, which I did over on that build, and you saw that in the last one. And moving on to here, we can go for a little bit more of a complicated one with a window. So we'll just build it up right here. Once again, sticking to the 5x5 grid that we have outlined, adding the stripped pale oak. I do apologize, I mostly play this game in German, so memorizing some of these names is a little difficult for me. And now that we have the window, we can kind of work on a texture. Now, what would I want to go for here? Let's go ahead and grab ourselves some spruce stairs and spruce trapdoors. And we can make ourselves a little arch just to make this very interesting, but yet keep it fairly simple. We'll even add a little place here that will serve as an awning, and you can have, why not just have one of these, or you could use a candle. It's not going to be a very important cell, it's going to be something that's more of an overhang for times where you have pieces that come out of a build. Just add a little bit of variation between the walls that you have. This is a very simple window design that is tried and true, has been used for many, many years. Now here we'll have some larger structures, which once again, we're gonna just go ahead and use this regular base, but on this last one, we're going to go ahead and do a stone structure, just to differentiate between the styles that we're using here. And here we'll go ahead and outline the wall, nothing special. You can see that it's just this big old piece. Now you'll notice that I have two windows over here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to design a structural piece for a much larger wall. This one I may not be so good at, as I don't normally make structural pieces that are this large, but you could very simply go along with this shape here, which will give it a big cross, and this will only be good for much larger builds. Now, let's go ahead and try this here. Let's see if we can't make one that's more of a cross, which has a little bit more detail and will work a little nicer with the smaller builds. Actually, I think it would be just fine if we used full blocks. I don't think I have any full blocks anywhere, so we'll just use slabs. Yep, perfectly viable. And that will be better for a smaller build with a little more detail. So for this, I'm going to trade out all my wood for some stone. So we'll go ahead and do some basic stuff, grab a small pallet of blocks, we'll grab stone bricks, chiseled stone bricks, and deep slate tiles. And I'm gonna do something that's more similar to something you might see in my survival realm. Now, what I normally like to do in my survival realm is I actually like to make very thick stone structures with a lot of depth, a lot of shape, and a lot of intrigue. I don't know why I'm building it in this shape. I can't lie. But this is always a fair start. You've got a lot to work with here. Let's go ahead and give it a curve for now. We might decide to change that a little later. It has been a while since I've worked a lot with stone, but I do always enjoy working with stone. It's come with its own set of challenges. For example, really getting a arch to work here is sometimes slightly challenging, but with a little bit of work, you can always get it to work out. As you can see, I've used stairs, a full block, and then a half block to create a nice broad arch. Now I'll go ahead and knock this wall out and make a third level of depth to this wall, so it will be really big. This can be used for bridges, for foundations, if you want a really fancy foundation, though I don't recommend it. We'll go ahead and grab some warped stem wood, warped wood. I'm going to need a slab for this. Ooh. Hello. There you are. And place this there and there. There we go. We have a nice layered curve, and these trapdoors give it just a little more of a feeling that this curve here is a bit more extreme than this one, which is nice. Now for back here, we'll go ahead and put a deep slate tile backing to it to give it a nice backdrop. Now, from here, what we can do is give this backdrop a little texture. Polished basalt is a nice block with this. We can also go grab some deep slate tile walls, just for a little. And from here, as this kind of feels a little deep, you might be able to spruce this up with with a assortment of leaves. I like to use spruce, birch, and oak as it's a nice gradient. Go ahead and make it a nice amount of leaves. This adds a lot of color to the structure. Make sure you vary your leaves out a bit, and make sure that it kind of follows a gradient where it goes lighter the more up you go. And that will make it have a lot more intrigue to it. You could do a lot more with this, like whenever you line it up, you could attach it in some way. For a build using warp, I like to use the warped stem without using the strip, as it has this nice, almost luminescent, lightly moving texture to it. And I like to give it stairs and chiseled stone bricks to add more depth, and from here we can further get make overhangs and such that give the build more depth and will even allow you to go further up. Imagine for a moment that you are building in survival, and you're thinking, but how can I use a grid for a survival build? How exactly is it possible to use this grid that's built on a fully flat surface on something that might be uneven? Well, actually, using this grid is very helpful for building on uneven surfaces. Say you're in survival and you have this little area that's got a slight incline to it, and it's got some weird stuff going on. For example, you've got this weird indent and this thing here. Now, doing some modifications to the terrain, like clearing out this little piece that comes out weirdly, or filling this in, is perfectly fine. And really anything is perfectly fine so long as you can make a nice little build out of it. But something like that isn't really a huge change in the terrain. It's quite simple, and if you don't want to spend a bunch of time flattening out this big ol' area so that you can make a house, it is totally viable to just fill in a few things, take out a weird piece of terrain or two, no big deal. But where this comes in handy is that you can use this to outline a foundation for your building. Just as you see over there, I have a foundation. You can also use a foundation in this sort of design. So say you want to use a 5x5 grid to create yourself a outline for your build. That way you have a good idea of what you want to make your house out of, but you're having a little trouble with the terrain. Here's where a grid will be helpful and how you can use this in survival. Go ahead and take the whatever you want to use, really, to structure this out. In fact, I won't even use wool. It may be better if we're showing a survival showcase to do everything that I do in a material that you might use in survival. So let's go ahead and grab the palette that I use for texturing a stone foundation. I actually messed up the grid. I messed up the grid. You can of course change this later in order to have a floor that you like more, or anything of the sort. Doesn't matter, just so long as you have your grid that will help you outline where each of these pieces will go. But you've got this terrain here that doesn't match the floor of your base. You'll think, oh, I've got to extend the terrain. But you don't have to do anything like that yet. Instead, go ahead and take this and pop it out a little bit. That way you can outline a foundation for your building, which many buildings have in real life. If they don't, they will fall over. And here you have this L-shaped building, and now you have a foundation. With these pillars here, you can feel free to knock out these lines, as you won't be needing them. Or you can keep them if that helps you, but we don't really need them. And we'll fill them back in here. Now for the foundation, you can just feel free to break a few of these pieces down. Go ahead and layer out something like this. Just cobblestone at the bottom is fine. And you can just add cobblestone here and there, just to add a little bit of detail and keep things a bit interesting. In fact, if you would like, you can even reduce the amount of cobblestone up here for a little extra detail. Then we can just layer a nice thin layer of andesite on top. I've done that too many times in a row. Let's go ahead and reduce it to like that. And then just add some stone. I didn't finish the andesite. We'll go ahead and finish the andesite. A little scatterbrained here, but that's not too big of a deal. Now you have a small foundation that doesn't really conform to a huge 5x5 structure. And from here, I'll go ahead and do what I like to do and grab a few of these. We won't be detailing them, as I'd like for you to be able to practice that on your own, but we can, of course, do a little bit of work on the shape and structure, so you kind of know how to use this. From here, in survival, I would normally begin a frame, and you'll notice that this is a 5x5 frame. And I'll go ahead and put this all along here, just as you might in survival, where you build it one piece at a time as you go up. Now we'll go ahead and finish the frame. And then we will fill in each cell with our walls. Oh no, you exclaim. There's a problem. Look. This doesn't conform to our 5x5 frame. This is a 5x4. What can we do? How are we going to fix something like this? Well, don't worry. Things like these are supposed to happen in the creative process. Sometimes you'll run into a situation where something didn't quite turn out the way you intended. And whenever something like this happens and you don't know how to deal with it, it can be a bit daunting. But what I like to do is I like to give it a nice low detail piece, just so whenever something like this happens, I have something here. It's not super noisy and it's not very important, and it just pulls the attention of the person looking at it in another direction. So something that doesn't have something hugely sophisticated will tend to draw your attention away to other places. And that is normally what you would want to do with something like this, especially since it's too small to have a window and not really big enough for any big details to be in it. Now, like I said, we won't be detailing this here, but I will decide to put in a few windows here and there just to give you an idea of where you might want windows here and where you might want to skip out on them. But I'd rather you choose for yourself. You may also ask, where would you want to put the doorway here? Quite frankly, you could replace any single one of these window slots for a doorway. All you would have to do is just change the location of where it is and build a staircase out of it. And for something like this, you may want to change that to a door, add a nice surface here, and then just create a little staircase going down. Just a little bit of detailing on the back end here. Oops. You'll be able to create a small staircase, and that will be your way into the building. But you don't have to do that. You can do a lot of different things. That doesn't have to be your only method of creating an entrance. In fact, it could be here, but I don't exactly have terrain here. So go ahead and try this for yourself in creative. Take a few walls of any size. Choose a size to work with, and find different ways to detail that wall. Try windows, no windows, raise them off of ground and add a staircase. And once you've done that, start building something with a grid layout and put those designs into the cells on the grid. It's okay if you don't get it the first try, or the second, or the third. It's not about getting things perfect the first time, it's about finding new ways to detail your structures through trial and error. In part 3 of this series, I will go over several different ways to plan and build roofs, and go over my favorite way to build roofs, which you'll see countless times in my Minecraft streams. To be notified when this part is released or I go live, subscribe and enable notifications. Thank you so much for watching, and happy building.